When she goes silent, when she walks away, when every sign points to her being gone forever, your mind automatically jumps to the worst conclusion. You start believing this is the end, the final chapter, the closing door you can never reopen. But what you don't realize is that silence is rarely the ending. It's the reset. It's the moment when both lives pause, emotions settle, and the truth rises to the surface. People don't make their clearest decisions while they're overwhelmed. They make their clearest decisions once the storm calms down, and that silence, that distance, that painful quiet you feel right now, it's simply the storm passing. When a woman pulls away, it's usually not because she stopped caring. It's because she cares too much and doesn't know what to do with everything she's feeling. Maybe things got heavy, maybe misunderstandings piled up, maybe she felt unseen, unheard, or emotionally disconnected. Or maybe she needed to step back to understand what her heart is actually telling her. You think she's gone forever, but she's just trying to hear her own thoughts again after being overwhelmed by everything that happened. In those moments, your fear makes you believe the silence is permanent. You start replaying every mistake, every fight, every word you wish you could take back. You start imagining her moving on, forgetting you, replacing you. And the more you panic, the more you feel like you have to chase her, contact her, explain yourself, fix things immediately. But that only destroys the reset she actually needs. The truth is, this quiet phase isn't your chance to chase, it's your chance to breathe. It's your chance to regain the version of yourself she first fell for, the version she connected with, the version who wasn't desperate, anxious, or afraid of losing her. Space is not rejection, it is clarity, it is healing, it is where people rediscover what they truly feel. And while you think she's out there celebrating freedom, moving on without looking back, what's really happening is far more human. She's thinking, she's replaying everything too. She's reflecting on the moments when you made her feel loved, safe, appreciated. She's also feeling the absence of your presence. She's learning what life is like without your energy in it. And that's something you can't rush, can't force, and can't interrupt. You have to let silence do its job. When you stop panicking and start accepting the space, everything shifts. You begin to reconnect with yourself. You start focusing on your growth, your mindset, your emotional balance. And when she begins to sense that you're not chasing, not forcing, not breaking apart, something powerful happens. The reset turns into curiosity. She starts wondering why you're calm. She starts noticing that you're not trying to pull her back. She starts realizing that the man she once felt overwhelmed by is becoming centered, composed, and in control again. That shift alone can change everything. Women don't return because you panic, they return because you grow. They don't return because you beg, they return because time and space reveal the truth they couldn't see before. She might be quiet now, but that silence is full of reflection, emotion, and realization. She might be distant, but distance is where emotional clarity happens. And the more you let the silence breathe, the more she begins to see what life feels like without you and what life used to feel like with you. This isn't the ending. This is the reset life gives you before it gives you another chance. When a woman pulls away, your first instinct is to assume she's cold, heartless, or completely done with you, but that's rarely the truth. Emotional distance is not always a sign of indifference, it's often a sign of overwhelm. When she suddenly becomes quiet, when her energy shifts, when the messages slow down or her tone changes, it's because something inside her is conflicted. She's not trying to punish you, she's trying to protect herself from emotions she doesn't fully understand yet. Women don't walk away because they feel nothing. They walk away because they feel as too much, and those feelings aren't lining up with the behavior they're seeing from you. Maybe she felt a change in your effort. Maybe she questioned your intentions. Maybe she sensed inconsistency, a lack of emotional leadership, or moments where you pulled back without realizing it. To her, that becomes confusion, and confusion becomes emotional fatigue, and emotional fatigue becomes distance. She steps away not to erase you, but to regain control of the feelings she can't manage while staying close. What you see as indifference is often self preservation. She needs space to calm her mind, regulate her emotions, and figure out whether the connection you had is worth leaning into again. And during this phase, she will overthink everything, the good, the bad, the moments you made her laugh, the moments you made her doubt, the things she wished she said, the boundaries she wished she kept. Her mind is loud, and stepping back is the only way she can hear herself clearly. She's not avoiding She's confronting her own uncertainty. This is exactly the moment where most men break everything. They chase, they push, they beg for clarity. They try to fix her emotions instantly, not realizing that pressure is the worst thing to apply when someone is already overwhelmed. The more you try to force connection when she's emotionally overloaded, the more she retreats, not because she doesn't care, but because she feels suffocated by expectations she's not ready to meet. You think she's letting you go, but she's actually trying to stop the emotional roller coaster long enough to understand what she really wants. But here's the part most men never understand: distance is where attraction is rebuilt. Silence gives her the emotional freedom needed to feel you again without pressure, without tension, without fear of repeating the same cycle. It allows her memory to speak louder than the conflict. This is where she remembers the softness, the intimacy, the late night conversations, the laughter, the ease you once gave her. Those moments resurface not when you chase, but when you give her the space to let the positive memories breathe again. When you stay calm instead of reactive, centered instead of needy, patient instead of desperate, you give her something she didn't expect: peace. You show her that you're not depending on her to regulate your emotions. You prove that you're strong enough to withstand uncertainty without falling apart. That alone separates you from every man who melted under pressure. That alone reminds her why she connected with you in the first place. And as her emotions reset, something shifts inside her. The overwhelm fades, the fear dissolves, and her heart becomes open again. Not because you forced it, but because you respected her emotional process. She may be distant now, but that distance isn't the end. It's the recalibration needed before she can feel safe enough to draw close again. Silence is not rejection, it's the space where her feelings reorganize themselves. And if you allow this process to unfold without interference, it often leads to clarity that brings her back with more certainty than before. All she needs right now is space to understand what her heart is trying to tell her. When you're convinced she's never coming back, your mind becomes your own worst enemy. You replay conversations, rethink every moment, and convince yourself that the story is already written, that she's moved on, that she's forgotten you, that she doesn't feel a single thing anymore. But what you don't realize is that women rarely detach instantly. They detach in stages, quietly, internally, slowly, and then all at once. And those stages are filled with emotional conflict, not certainty. So while you're sitting there assuming it's over, she's going through a completely different psychological process, one that still involves you far more than you think. A woman doesn't let go of a man she once cared about without going through waves of reflection, regret, curiosity, and confusion. Even if she seems cold, even if she acts like she's done, even if she says she's moving on, those words are usually shields. Women often speak from the emotion of the moment, not the truth of the future. And when she steps away, she tells herself she's doing what's right, what's logical, what's safest. But the heart doesn't obey logic. The heart remembers, and the heart doesn't turn off just because the relationship hit a crisis. Here's the part you don't see when she's alone: the noise stops, the arguments stop, the doubts stop, the pressure stops. And in that quiet space, something else rises: memory. That's when she starts comparing what she had with you to what she has without you, the messages she no longer receives, the presence she no longer feels, the attention, the comfort, the familiarity that she once took for granted. She begins to notice the empty spaces where you used to be, and suddenly the silence becomes louder than the breakup. Women feel the loss differently than men. Men feel it immediately. Women feel it eventually. At first, she's empowered, relieved, or emotionally numb. But later, when the emotional dust settles, she starts reflecting, replaying, rethinking. She wonders if she misjudged you, if she reacted too quickly, if her emotions led her into a decision she wasn't fully ready for, if she misunderstood your silence, your distance, or your intentions. She thinks about the version of you she connected with, the one who made her smile without trying, the one who brought peace into her life, the one who made her feel safe. And that version of you doesn't disappear from her memory just because the relationship ended. This is exactly why you must stop assuming the ending before the story has time to unfold. Because emotionally, she's not as far away as you think. She's not forgetting you, she's recalibrating her feelings toward you. She's trying to understand what was real and what was temporary. She's trying to figure out if the loss of you brings her more peace or more discomfort. And most importantly, She's trying to determine whether returning to you would bring stability or chaos. The biggest mistake men make is believing her silence means closure. It doesn't. Her silence is simply her processing phase. And while she's processing, she's watching your behavior from afar. She's observing how you handle distance, how you hold yourself emotionally, how you move with dignity instead of desperation. She pays attention to whether you chase her or respect her space, whether you spiral or stay centered. And the way you behave during this time becomes a huge part of what she eventually decides. She's not gone. She's questioning, she's comparing, she's reconsidering. And whether she comes back or not depends less on what you say and more on who you become during her absence. Give her the space to feel your absence and the clarity to miss your presence. There comes a moment, long after the arguments, long after the emotional chaos, long after the silence, when she finally begins to feel the weight of what she walked away from. And contrary to what your mind tells you in your lowest moments, this realization doesn't happen because you begged, chased, or tried to convince her. It happens because you didn't, because you stepped back, because you allowed reality to reveal itself without force. When a man stops over investing, stops over explaining, and stops trying to fix everything, a woman is finally left alone with the truth. Her feelings were real, and losing you means losing the security and emotional grounding that she once relied on, even if she didn't admit it. This is when her mind begins to make the comparisons she avoided before. She looks at other men, other conversations, other interactions, and she can't help but notice something is missing. The emotional comfort is different. The familiarity is gone. The authenticity she once had with you isn't easily found again. People often assume that when a woman leaves, she already has someone new lined up, someone ready to replace you. But what they forget is that emotional connection isn't replaceable. You don't just swap out the bond you built over months or years with a new face or a new voice. Even if she tries, even if she entertains new attention, deep down she feels the gap between being genuinely understood and merely being noticed. This is also the stage where regret begins, not the dramatic kind that makes her rush back instantly, but the subtle kind that grows inside her slowly. It comes in moments when she hears a song that reminds her of you, when she passes a place you went together, when she sees something that triggers a memory she didn't even know she still carried. These moments add up and they soften her defenses. They remind her that maybe she misinterpreted your intentions. Maybe she reacted emotionally. Maybe she let temporary frustration destroy something meaningful. And this realization doesn't hit her because you pushed, it hits her because you stayed silent and focused on your own growth. As time passes, she begins to reassess the value you brought into her life. She thinks about how you supported her, how you understood her moods, how you brought stability even during disagreements. She sees the difference between a man who chased her and a man who respected himself enough not to. The version of you she now remembers is the version she lost, not the one from the breakup, not the one from the fight, but the one who made her feel safe, calm, and emotionally grounded. And that version of you stands out even more now that you've pulled your energy back and stopped giving her what she used to take for granted. This shift inside her creates a powerful emotional ripple. She starts to wonder what you're thinking, whether you've moved on, whether you still care. Your silence becomes a mirror that reflects her own internal conflict. And as she tries to interpret your lack of contact, she starts to fear something she never feared before, the possibility that you might actually be done. That realization hits harder than you imagine because for the first time, she understands that you were not waiting around. She understands that her decisions had real consequences. And that's where the regret deepens, not because she's sure she wants you back, but because she's no longer sure she doesn't. She doesn't admit this, she doesn't show it, she doesn't text you confess what she's feeling, but internally she's wrestling with emotions she thought she had under control. And whether she chooses to return or not, this moment of clarity always arrives. It's human nature. We only realize the weight of someone when we experience life without their presence. And that's why your silence becomes powerful, not as a strategy, but as a reflection of your growth. When you stay grounded, focused, and centered in who you are, she has no choice but to see the truth she once ignored. And in that truth, she confronts the possibility that losing you might have been her biggest mistake. There comes a point in the journey of separation where the emotional tides shift, not because you said anything, not because you tried to prove your worth, but simply because time stripped away the illusions she once held. When a woman walks away, she often believes she's leaving behind the problem, the stress, the confusion. She convinces herself that distance will give her clarity, and in many ways it does. But clarity doesn't always confirm her decision. Sometimes clarity dismantles it because as life moves on, she begins to see you through a different lens, one that isn't clouded by temporary emotions, misunderstandings, or the heat of conflict. This is when she begins to realize something she didn't expect. The version of you she remembers is not the version of you that lives in her memory after you step back. When you stop chasing, when you stop trying to fix everything, when you stop waiting for her to come around, you unintentionally raise your value in her eyes, not by manipulation, not by playing games, but by demonstrating something rare, self respect. And self respect, especially from a man she once cared about, forces her to rethink everything she thought she knew about the relationship. She starts piecing together all the moments where you showed consistency, maturity, emotional stability, patience, and strength. She compares those qualities with the men around her. The ones trying to impress her, the ones giving her attention, the ones saying the right things but lacking depth. And slowly, she begins to see that what she had with you wasn't as ordinary as she once convinced herself. The emotional bond, the communication, the comfort, the laughter, the shared vulnerabilities, those things don't easily replicate themselves. They were formed through time, through experiences, through sincerity. And as she interacts with new people, she realizes how rare that kind of connection truly is. This awareness doesn't hit her all at once. It shows up in random waves of conversation that feels forced compared to the ease she had with you, a compliment that feels shallow compared to the authenticity you offered, a moment where she wishes she could talk to someone who genuinely understood her, and your name is the first that comes to mind. These moments reveal something that no amount of moving on can fully erase. She didn't just lose a person, she lost a presence. But the most surprising shift happens when she notices how well you're doing without her. She sees your silence not as indifference, but as strength. She sees your detachment not as coldness, but as confidence. She sees your absence not as rejection, but as a sign that you're finally valuing yourself. And that internal change, your inner stability, is what stirs something inside her. She didn't anticipate admiration because women don't regret losing a man who fell apart without them. They regret losing a man who became better without them. Your growth becomes the loudest message you never spoke. The version of you she walks away from is not the version of you she sees when you evolve in silence. And that contrast forces her to confront a painful truth. She misjudged your worth. She misunderstood who you were. She underestimated what she had. As this realization settles in, it creates a quiet longing, not necessarily to come back immediately, but to reconnect, to understand, to see if the bond still exists. And that quiet longing is powerful because it isn't based on loneliness or desperation. It's based on recognition, recognition of your value, recognition of her loss, recognition of the difference between who you were and who you've become. Your silence didn't push her away. It gave her the space to see what she couldn't see before. And in that space, she discovers that losing you wasn't an escape, it was a mistake. There is always one final moment in every separation, one moment that doesn't get talked about enough, yet it decides everything. It's the moment when she looks at your absence not as something temporary, not as something she controlled, but as something real. And that realization hits her when she least expects it. When the silence is no longer a tactic, when your distance is no longer a reaction, and when your focus has shifted fully onto your own life, your goals, your inner peace, that's when she begins to understand the depth of what she walked away from. At first, she assumed you'd always be there, that no matter how long she stayed silent, no matter how cold she acted, no matter how distant things became, you would still be orbiting around her, thinking about her, waiting for her, wanting her. She counted on your affection. She counted on your loyalty. She counted on your emotional investment because it had always been a constant. But the moment she realizes that constant is gone, that's when the emotional landscape inside her begins to shift. She starts to understand that she wasn't only losing a man, she was losing a version of herself that existed only when she was with you. Women don't regret losing you because of the breakup itself. They regret it when they see how life feels without the emotional grounding you once gave them. She remembers the security she felt when you listened, the comfort she felt when you understood her without her explaining everything, the stability she felt when you stood by her, even when things were complicated. And now, with you gone, life isn't as balanced as she imagined it would be. The people around her don't feel the same. The conversations don't flow the same. The attention she gets from others doesn't fulfill her the way yours once did. Most men think a woman's regret hits instantly after a breakup, but that's not how the heart works. Her regret arrives slowly, quietly, piece by piece, like a puzzle forming in the background of her mind. It begins when she notices your silence. It grows when she sees your growth. It deepens when she realizes she no longer has access to the emotional connection you once shared. And by the time she confronts the full picture, it's no longer uncertainty she feels. It's fear that you might truly be moving on. Fear that someone else might experience the version of you she once took for granted. Fear that the emotional safety you created in her life will now be someone else's comfort. What truly shocks her is not your silence, it's what your silence represents. It represents maturity, it represents healing, it represents a man who doesn't beg for love but attracts it. And that version, that evolved version, is the one she never expected to lose because she left thinking one thing, that you needed her more than she needed you. But now she sees the truth. You didn't fall apart. You didn't chase. You didn't collapse under the weight of heartbreak. You kept going, kept building, kept improving. And there is nothing more attractive, more intimidating, and more regret inducing to a woman than a man who transforms pain into power. At this stage, the question inside her shifts from, "Is he thinking about me?" to, "Does he even want me anymore?" That uncertainty shakes her more deeply than the breakup ever did. Because for the first time, she no longer feels in control of the narrative. She no longer feels sure about her decision. She no longer feels confident that she can return whenever she wants. And that's when regret fully blooms. When she realizes that your absence has become your strength and your silence has become your message, a message she never expected to hear. In the end, your growth becomes the turning point she never saw coming.